having me here today. I don't think I have to share anything else because Kristen really covered kind of what I do at the Beef Council. I've been a registered dietitian for 10 years now, and I love doing cooking demos and talking about nutrition, just weaving those two things together. And while I'm really more accustomed to doing it in person, of course, now we've moved to the online world and we're doing cooking demos virtually. So we will get to that a little bit later. We're going to be making a beef stuffing recipe with apples and cranberries. So a great thing for the holidays. And we are going to start with just some brief slides to talk about, how do we incorporate beef into our holiday meal? What does that look like, whether it's the main entree or an appetizer, a side dish, and then some important things to keep in mind when it comes to choosing the right cut, depending on what you're trying to do. So I'm going to go ahead and share my slides with you all. And let's see. Kristen or Kevin, is everyone seeing my slides okay?
Yes, I see it.
Yes. All right. Perfect. All right, so I wanted to start with this delicious picture here, a beautiful beef roast on the holiday table. Of course, we traditionally think of maybe turkey being the centerpiece of the Thanksgiving table, but I mean, it doesn't get much prettier than this rib roast or this beef roast, in my opinion. So definitely room for beef at the holidays. And here's some more pictures just to kind of get your mouth watering around lunchtime. We have so many great recipes available on our website, tnbeef.org, and also on beefitswhatsfordinner.com. So we share a lot of the same content. We get a lot of our resources, educational materials, recipes from beefitswhatsfordinner.com. So if you're ever in need of any kind of beef educational material, or you need to know something about how to prepare a particular cut of beef, that is your go-to resource, beefitswhatsfordinner.com. But you can also visit our website because most of the content on there will take you to Beef It's What's for Dinner. So we won't talk about all of these delicious recipes today necessarily, but whether it's brunch that you're feeding your family, maybe on Christmas Eve morning, or you're having a little get together for New Year's Eve even, you could do beef as an appetizer. And then of course, meatballs are always a favorite when you're having a little gathering of people. And then our main event here being the beef roast. So before we get into some particular cuts that you can use around the holidays, I did want to highlight the nutrition aspect about beef. I am a dietitian, so always trying to incorporate that nutrition element, but beef is a very nutrient-dense protein. And in 3 ounces of beef, you'll get about 10 essential vitamins and minerals for only about 170 calories. So that's a very nutrient-dense food. Lots going on in a very small package, as we like to call it. So you're getting protein, vitamin B12, zinc, selenium, niacin, vitamin B6, phosphorus, choline. So you're getting a lot of great nutrition for your, immune health, also just muscle strength and energy. Your B vitamins are really important for energy. And then we know that protein is very satisfying and satiating. So when we have an adequate amount of protein at each meal throughout the day, it can keep us feeling fuller longer, meaning we're not going to necessarily overeat at that meal or maybe snack as much on other things in between meals. So that's really the benefit of having adequate protein at each meal. And when I say adequate protein, that means anywhere from 20 to 25 grams of protein at each meal. And here you can see that there are lots of lean cuts of beef available in the supermarket. Nearly 65% of all beef muscle cuts sold in grocery stores are considered lean. So that's a pretty good majority. And just so you know, as a reference, USDA definition of lean refers to a 3.5-ounce cooked serving of any protein, whether it's beef, chicken, pork. It has to meet this criteria of less than 10 grams of total fat, less than 4.5 grams of saturated fat, and less than 95 milligrams of cholesterol. So those are defined terms and criteria from the USDA. And here we just have a few of the popular beef cuts that you can find either in the retail meat case or at a restaurant. So strip steak, top sirloin, the tenderloin, filet, top round, and bottom round. Those are all the most popular lean cuts of beef that you'll find at your grocery store generally. And when it comes to the restaurant setting, top sirloin, again, the tenderloin, filet, flank steak, and the top strip loin. So flank steak is actually one that you've probably seen more recently in the grocery store. It wasn't as commonly found 4 or 5 years ago, but now you can pretty regularly find a flank steak. And of course, ground beef is probably one of the other popular cuts at the grocery store, but whether or not people are necessarily buying lean, that depends. But we do see more of the lean ground beef in our retail setting now. All right, so let's look at the different primal cuts here from the beef animal. We have several different areas that we kind of section things out into. And the beef animal generally fattens from the front to the back. And so that's good to keep in mind because that will impact marbling and the flavor of the beef cut. So leaner cuts come from the loin and the round section, so towards the back here. And that makes sense when we just learned that the beef animal fattens from the front to the back. So if you're standing at the meat case and you want to try to find a lean cut of beef, but you can't remember them all off the top of your head because there are so many different cuts of beef, you can always know that if it has the word loin or round, it's going to be a lean cut. So to go through each of these primal cuts here, chuck generally has a very rich, beefy flavor. This is a heavily exercised muscle, and so it may require a moist heat cooking method and maybe marinating because it's heavily exercised. That means it's less tender. So important to keep that in mind with the chuck roast. And you probably think of a chuck roast when it comes to making a pot roast, which is going to be that moist heat cooking method. You wouldn't buy chuck and then just throw it straight onto the grill. Or we know that sometimes our ground beef can come from this section. In the rib portion, these are generally juicy and flavorful, lots of marbling here, and they're tender. So you can use that dry cooking method like grilling with just like adding a dry rub. Then in our loin section, this is a very tender section, but it also has a lot of those lean cuts again. So you're also going to get many of your premium steaks and roasts. I know you're all familiar with tenderloin or filet mignon. Comes from this section here. And we suggest that you only use dry heat cooking methods because it is a very tender section. So if we were to throw a filet mignon or a tenderloin into the crock pot, that would not be a good use of that cut of meat. So we know that when people are buying beef, it's maybe a pricier option, or it's going to be used for a special occasion, some of the particular cuts. And so we want to make sure that people are preparing them in the best way possible so you can get the best results. All right, moving to the back here, we have the round, which is milder in flavor, usually requires a moist heat cooking method, but some of the cuts can just be marinated and then dry cooked. So depending on what you have, you could just add a nice marinade of maybe some soy sauce, or depending on what you're doing with it, some lemon juice, anything with that acid element to help marinate and tenderize the muscle fibers. Here on the bottom, we have our brisket, which is very affordable beef cut, best used for braising and stew, and often cured for corned beef. We see a lot of that, of course, in March. And lastly, our flank section, still best to marinate these. Flank steak, which we talked about, it's really gained a lot of popularity over the past few years. Good when it's grilled, but it is best to marinate that first to help break down some of the muscle fibers. And then skirt steak, also another good option if you're gonna make a fajitas or stir fry, but we wanna make sure we marinate. And it's also great if you can cut this into very thin slices before serving. That helps make it easier to chew. All right, and so keeping with our holiday theme, we often think of our beef roast as that centerpiece, and roast means it's going to be thicker than 2 inches of muscle meat there, and suitable for dry heat cooking, like in a roasting pan, or you could do it on a grill as well. And if you're serving a larger crowd, it's best to get a premium roast, something that's obviously a little bit larger. You can go further. But if you are having a smaller gathering, this year with everything going on, that's something that we're hearing more of, people just getting together for a smaller gathering. And a beef tri-tip roast could be a good option for that. That way you don't have a whole lot of beef left over. But leftover beef is not always a bad thing, as long as you know a good way to make use of it. And for those who may not want to carve up a rib roast, a boneless roast is a good way to go. Very easy to cut. Tenderloin is another good option if you are wanting to really have a nice, really standout dish, like a beef Wellington, for instance. That's always a fancy option around the holidays. In our office a couple years ago, we actually made one of the beef Wellington recipes, and it was great. That was my first attempt at one, and although there are several steps involved with searing your meat and making kind of a coating that goes around the tenderloin, and then you make the flaky pastry crust that goes around the outside, it was well worth the effort. So those are just a few tips and pointers when it comes to choosing beef for your holiday meal. I want to just stop here for a second to see if there are any questions before we get into our cooking demo. So if you have any questions, I suppose probably putting them in the chat box is the easiest thing, or if it's okay to unmute and ask, that is fine with me as well. I'm not actually, oh, there it is, chat. So, don't see any questions here yet. I'm gonna switch over to my last slide, and I hope everyone can still see this last slide okay, with my contact info. But if you do have any follow-up questions about anything we talked about, or if you need any educational materials about Beef for the Holidays. We have some nice brochures in our office. Happy to send a few your way, but really everything that you could possibly need when it comes to how to prep your roast, then how to cook it, how long, how much you need, depending on how many people you're serving, and then, of course, safely cooking that beef to whatever desired temperature you want, carving it, then storing it. All of that information can be found on beefitswhatsfordinner.com. So Sarah's asking about any beef shortages that you know of. I don't know of any currently. I think everything has really bounced back fairly well since March, April, May time period. So I know personally in the grocery stores I've been shopping at a few months ago, I was having a hard time even finding top sirloin, which is a cut I cook with often just throughout the week. But that hasn't been an issue more recently. So it has seemed pretty well stocked. I'm not sure if anyone else maybe has experienced anything different, but you can share that with us. Oh, someone said the sound is pretty low. Can you guys, I do have a mic hooked up. Hope you were able to catch most of that. Sorry.
Carmen, you're coming in pretty clear. I might ask folks might turn their volume up on their computers. Your volume is pretty good so far. So if
Okay.
you're having a trouble hearing, they may want to turn their volume up on their computer.
Okay. Let's see. All right. So again, if you have any questions before the end of our time here today, feel free to put that in the chat box, or again, reach out to me via email. Always happy to answer questions. You can also find us on social media, Facebook at TN Beef Council, or if you're on Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, we're there too. And starting December 1st, we will actually be starting our 12 days of beef for the holidays. So each day we'll have a new recipe or share a new tip. We'll also be including some local chefs and bloggers in some of our videos to just highlight the many ways that we can include beef in our holiday gatherings. All right. So I'm going to stop my share here as we move on to our cooking demo. I know Carla's cooking along with me. Is anyone else by chance cooking along today? If you are, I will note that I'm going to do a half recipe right now, but I will give the full recipe measurements if you are cooking along. I'm only doing a half recipe because I wanted to make sure I had a finished product to show you today. So, but it's also a good thing to know about this recipe is that if you are having a smaller gathering this year and you don't want 12 servings worth of stuffing, this is a really easy recipe to just cut in half. So this particular one does serve 12 people, but you can make a smaller portion to serve 6 people. So that's pretty nice. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and preheat my oven to 350 degrees. Again, this is just the beef stuffing with apples and cranberries. So it is different from kind of our traditional stuffing that consistency-wise, it may be more, I don't want to call it mushy necessarily, depends on how we make our stuffing really, but this is more of a ready kind of stuffing and doesn't necessarily like stick or hold together. But when it comes to the flavor aspect, it still has that sage, which is pretty traditional for stuffing. So lots of great flavor Really, I think you could almost serve this as a meal itself because it has the ground beef, which is your source of protein. You're getting your bread and carbohydrates, and you could maybe serve this with an additional vegetable on the side. But that's just my own personal thought on this recipe. So we're using 93% lean ground beef. Again, the recipe itself, and thank you, Whitney, for adding that recipe into the chat box. I appreciate that. We start with 1 pound of 93% lean ground beef. And it's pretty nice that we're using the lean because then we don't have to worry about draining it after we cook it. I'm gonna let my skillet preheat. You all can see the skillet now at least. And while that preheats, I've gathered all of my other spices. So we have some garlic powder, onion powder, rubbed sage, and crushed red pepper. And then of course some salt. And then we're using leeks today. So if you're not familiar with leeks, it's like a really giant green onion. It is in the onion family. And for this particular recipe, we're only using really this bottom portion here, the white and the light green part. And we need 2 cups of sliced leeks. So I will say that leeks can be a little hard to clean at times. They get a lot of dirt and sand in them. So when I prep leeks, it is easiest to go ahead and cut them off here and then cut the bottom half in half, or the bottom portion in half, so you can get between all the layers. I'll show you with this one I've already cut into. So lots of layers here, and that dirt can get caught in there. So we want to make sure that we rinse our leeks really, really well. Sometimes putting it into a colander is helpful. You can do that too. All right, so my pan is preheated, and technically the recipe says we want to mix together all of our seasonings and our ground beef together in a bowl. I like to save on dishes, so I actually skip that step and just add my spices straight to the beef once it's in the pan. So you can do whichever one you prefer. And if you're making the full recipe, then we need 2 teaspoons of garlic powder. Well, actually at this point you only want 1 teaspoon. We're adding half of our spices. So 1 teaspoon of the garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of onion powder, and 1 teaspoon of rubbed sage. You can add as much crushed red pepper as you'd like. Just remember it has a lot of heat to it, so be mindful of that, especially if you're entertaining others. Not everyone really feels the same about spiciness. So, and then we add in our salt. And as long as you can just really mix it all together in your skillet, you'll be okay. But as I said, it's an option to add your ground beef to your mixing bowl and add all the spices, work together with your hands, and then add it to your skillet. And of course, we just want to use our spatula to break it all up into small pieces. And I have my heat at about medium high. So I would really love to know, if you can put it in the chat box, who is planning to have beef at Thanksgiving, whether it's an appetizer or a side dish or the main event. All right, so we're letting that cook for, again, about 8 to 10 minutes. Just want to make sure that it's brown, no pink remains in that. And then, while the oven is still preheating, we can make sure that we have whatever we're cooking our stuffing in. We want to coat that dish with cooking spray. And since I'm making a smaller portion, I'm going to use a pie plate rather than a traditional like casserole dish. But generally, if you were making this recipe, you'd want a 9 by 13 baking dish. All right. Just stir that around a little bit. And I'm going to turn my screen down here just so you can see the leeks in my cutting board. I'm going to go ahead and slice these pretty thin. And we want 2 cups of sliced leeks total for our full recipe. If you weren't able to find leeks in your grocery store, you can use green onions, but I would just say, similar to this, use the white part and maybe a small portion of the green part. Not sure if leeks are readily available everywhere. All right, so that looks good on the leeks. We're going to set those off to the side because here in a second we will be cooking them in a pan with some butter. The other ingredient we have in our stuffing is apple, and it calls for green apple. It also says that we should peel them, but I really like just leaving the peel on my fruits generally, but that's a personal choice. Of course, if we leave the peel on, we will get some more fiber, nutrition with that. So we are using 2 cups of diced Granny Smith apple, and I've already chopped some of it. I'm going to finish chopping, but I always like to slice my apple and then turn them on their side like this, cut it in half again, and it makes it easier to get my dice without spending too much time chopping. There we go. So like I said, since I'm doing a half recipe, I'm just doing 1 cup of apple here. I know some people shared, see, not for Thanksgiving, but we do a standing rib roast for Christmas. Yep, always a beautiful thing at Christmas time. Carla says she's using green onions in her recipe. Yep, that will work just fine. Steaks for Thanksgiving, that sounds pretty good. And yeah, so the leeks can be pricier compared to green onions. And I will say, of course, since we're only using the bottom portion, we're going to be left with the rest of it. And if you're wondering how to use that, you can throw it into soup, or if you're making a stir fry. But this part is pretty thick, so you just want to make sure that you cook them down pretty well with whatever you're doing. Okay, and so obviously an important component of stuffing is our breadcrumbs, or bread cubes, excuse me. And the recipe calls for just 1 bag, a 12-ounce bag of unseasoned dried bread cubes, but I went ahead and bought a baguette and sliced it and diced it into cubes, and then just toasted it in the oven for a little bit. I really like the size that, I mean, you can create any size that you want, but sometimes the bag ones are very, very small. So I decided to just use a baguette, but whichever way you prefer. And again, when you're using fresh bread like that, you just want to make sure that after you've cubed it, diced it, put it into the oven, 350 degrees for like 5 minutes, just to help dry it up a little bit. All right, so the beef is cooked through. Turn off our heat, and there's really just not much to drain off of here at all. but you can use a slotted spoon to remove the beef from the pan and leave any drippings behind if there are any. We're going to use this same skillet to cook our leeks. I'm not going to put it back on the burner just yet because it's, of course, still pretty hot. So once you have your leeks ready to go into the skillet, you can add butter, and it calls for 2 tablespoons of butter. So we add that straight into the skillet. Now I'll put it back on my heat. Turn it on medium. And we're going to cook our leeks for about 5 minutes. And in our mixing bowl, we're holding off on adding anything else yet. We want to cook our leeks and then add those. We're using some dried cranberries in our stuffing as well. And you could give these a rough chop if you wanted to before you mix them in, but it's not totally necessary to do that. Well, let's see, we've got a question. What percentage fat ground beef? We're using a 93% lean. You could really probably use a leaner cut if it was available, but 90-10 would also be a fine option. Of course, if we're using 80-20, then just make sure you drain some of the grease away from your skillet. You use that slotted spoon to move your beef from the skillet to the mixing bowl, but you'd probably want to dab up some of the remaining grease in your skillet, or skip the butter element, and you could cook your leeks in the grease that remains. Butter tends to have a better flavor though. All right, so in go the leeks. Carla, how are you doing? I know you probably had some things to chop along the way.
Great, thank you for checking on me. Yeah. Oh wait, I should maybe turn on my camera a little bit. I want you to know I did cheat. Totally got this at the deli because I'm doing the full size version.
Yep.
So I'm trying to keep up, so I'll have an end product with you too. So
Oh, perfect.
I appreciate the guts that it takes to keep your camera on too, because I'm not going to keep my camera on. I do hope to share the end product with everybody. So
That is okay. Well, yeah, we'll see it before it goes into the oven.
Good idea. I'll do that.
Yeah, so we're going to let these leeks cook for 5 minutes. But I will share that if you all want to ever cook along with us again, we do a monthly virtual cooking club class. And actually tomorrow is our second in the series. We're making a beef bruschetta with garlic feta spread. It's probably one of my favorite recipes from beefitswhatsfordinner.com. It's so good. Actually, the picture was in the slideshow there at the beginning. So it's great holiday appetizer for any time you just need an appetizer. Yeah, so that's tomorrow, but the virtual cooking club class, you can go to our website and get details on that. So it's usually the, I guess it would be the second Tuesday of the month. This month we had to change it to Wednesday, but generally second Tuesday of the month. So go to our website, check that out. It's free to join. And if you join 6 of our cooking classes throughout the year, you'll be entered for a chance to win a Lodge cast iron cooking set. So, all right, so these leeks are looking pretty good. Picking up some of the crispy bits from the beef that we cooked, so that's always a good thing. And next we will, after we add in the leeks, of course, we'll have our beef broth that we add in and all of our other ingredients and some remaining spices. And this will bake for about 30 to 40 minutes in the oven, and we'll cover that with aluminum foil. But it's really just to kind of get all those flavors married together, heat through all the ingredients, because of course our beef is already cooked. All right, so I'm going to toss the leeks in with the ground beef. And I'm going to move my camera down again, just so you can see my cutting board. All right, so we add in the bread cubes. And our diced apple. The cranberries. Got some Christmas colors going on with the red and green here. Break up that big chunk. And our beef broth. We're using 2.5 cups of beef broth total. And then the rest of our spices. So the remaining amount of garlic powder, onion powder, rubbed sage. If you really love sage, you can add a little bit more. That's probably my favorite thing about stuffing is the sage. And then crushed red pepper, again to your liking, and some more salt. And we mix it all together. So it might look a little bit soupy and liquidy right now. That's okay, because those bread cubes are really dry. Pour that into whatever baking dish you're using. I've never done stuffing in a pie plate, but I think it will turn out just fine. All right, I just like to kind of move everything around so it's pretty uniform and everything's evenly distributed. So that looks pretty good there, I think. Again, you just cover that with aluminum foil and pop it in the oven for 30 to 40 minutes. And just like the magic of television, I have one that's already finished. So here's our final product. You can see. And it's really quite easy. All right, so are there any other questions about this recipe or anything we discussed? I think I'm going to go ahead and pop.
Yes, I have a question if I may.
Yeah.
If you use something like egg to make it a binder, could that be a main dish for a luncheon or a supper?
Yeah, I think you could probably add in an egg to this and make it more of a breakfast casserole, like a strata. Oh, there's, yeah, Carla's dish.
Okay.
Yeah, you could definitely go that route and make it more of a complete meal. And thank you for sharing the word binder, because that one slipped my mind earlier. I was trying to explain this.
I was going to say, also, could you just make a serving? Could you show us on how it would look on a serving plate? I mean, if you put it on a plate.
I just sent that link to the virtual cooking club, and then I believe Whitney shared the recipe earlier, but let me copy and paste that again. So here is the recipe that we just did. That's in the chat box there. Let me scoop out a serving here. So it is kind of a looser stuffing, as you can see. Breaks apart easily, but that's really how I prefer my stuffing. But everyone's a little bit different. So got our complete serving here. It smells really good. Again, you got your red and your green. Great for the holidays. Any other questions? I was going to show you one more thing on beefitswhatsfordinner.com. Again, feel free to drop questions in the chat box. Okay. So scroll back up here. This is beefitswhatsfordinner.com under the cooking section. Go back here. So just under the cooking section, you'll find Beef Up for the Holidays and lots of great information. This is the drool log, which if anyone watches Hallmark movies during the holiday season, you'll see this drool log in as a commercial in between your Hallmark movies. So that's kind of a fun thing. And then all kinds of recipes, anything you can want. Classic, again, brunch, those holiday appetizers, and some great cuts that you can serve your family, whether it's the rib eye roast, tenderloin, or the strip roast. And then just your general roasting basics and cooking times. So as I said, if there's something you need to know, it's probably already here on beefitswhatsfordinner.com. Yep, the Yule log is play on drool log is a play on the Yule log. It was actually shown in movie theaters last year. As you know, if you got there early enough to the movie theater, you'd see it before your movie started. All right. Well, Carla, I'm assuming your stuffing has gone into the oven. Yep. Good deal. So I'm covering mine. Did you cover yours with aluminum foil?
I did. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I may have to post on Facebook, you know, the results.
Yeah, that'd be great.
With the driving distance, you're welcome, because like you said, it did make a lot, but I do have a family of 4. So I'm thinking we could at least get one meal and some leftovers out of that. Looking forward to trying it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen, and Kevin and Kristen and everybody who put this together, for sure. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, Carla, I was thinking you were just going to invite all 48 people that's on here just to come and eat. You can.
Yeah, let's go. You know, one at a time at a safe distance. You are welcome to be here.
Hey, while I got the mic real quick, I'm gonna launch a poll that's got 3 questions on it just to get some feedback from today. So if everybody would just input on the poll there, and we'll leave it up for just a few minutes.
Well, thanks everyone. Reading through the chat box here, and if you haven't, I know you're doing your poll as well, but the link is here for the virtual cooking club, or just our website, tmbeef.org. It's on the homepage as well.
Thank you, Carmen. Whitney has posted a link for the FCE members to go back to the other Zoom. There it is again. So if you're looking for that link, it's in the chat box. And also Carmen's links are in the virtual cooking club, and then the recipes what we make today. So Chatbox has several links going on in there. You may find what you need there. But great job, Carmen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. I had fun with you today, and yeah, please reach out anytime. It'd be great to connect.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Happy holidays and wonderful, safe Thanksgiving.
Thanks.